Coffee,
I'll
so
slurp over there.
you can slurp. It's all good. I've got my coffee, and I've been waiting to have my coffee to come on here. So I'm pretty excited to have my coffee this morning. Awesome. So excited to have you here on the decision table, where, by the way, anything can happen, and it probably will. And this is a platform where I just love to have conversations with other amazing humans who you never know what you're going to learn. You never know what could come from the conversation, and it's as simple as having a conversation. And I, on purpose, by the way, don't get to know you beforehand. On purpose, I don't give questions. I don't, go, this is where we're going with it, because I don't know you and I don't know what's going to come from this. So welcome, Emma, to
Exciting.
the conversation. Where are you in the world right now?
I am in Norfolk in the UK.
Thought you were in a little place a little different to where we are.
Yeah.
So is that nighttime where you are?
Yeah, it's 10:15.
Oh my gosh, you are doing well. Bright
Yeah,
and
I
cheerful.
generally have a rest in the afternoon, so I'm feeling good. We had a nice dinner and yeah.
What was on the dinner tonight?
It's actually a Michelin star restaurant, so lots of little
Wow.
tastings, yeah. Really nice brill fish, gorgeous cauliflower dish.
Mm,
There was a bit of duck and a bit of deer. I eat meat, so it was just really
wow.
good.
So good high protein
High
in the meat there.
protein.
Love it. I'm
Yeah,
on I'm on a
I'm a low carb girl.
Go you. I'm on this crazy ass eating style right now because I'm trying to optimize my health. I've had trouble with it in the past,
Okay.
and where I ended up in a wheelchair and everything shut down. And so we're
Wow.
trying to get everything
Is that the
maximizing,
nerves?
optimizing. Yes. So it's interesting. My doctor now that I'm working with has said to me that he originally thinks I had a back injury that was undiagnosed, and that's what sent all this craziness off with sympathetic nerves, shut everything down, and yeah, so it's like over 14 years journey, and I'm on that
Wow.
next stretch of going, okay, we've got movement. I walk without a stick, I walk without any aid at all now, but that means everything's got to realign and everything's got to get pumping through and having flow through the inside. And so that's been a huge journey. So I literally, just before I came on, I pricked myself. I'm checking my keto, my glucose, everything, to see what foods are
Mm.
working, what are not working, and
I have some
working out through that.
amazing tips and
Mm.
contacts and really good ways of testing what's going on as well. So,
Okay, so give me three top tips on that so that listeners, I always go, what? They're talking about something, and then they open a loop and then you walk away from it. So give our listeners and those that will listen to this on a podcast later three tips that are good things to know about that.
I would say find a really, really advanced kinesiologist because they can backtrack, reverse engineer to exactly what the root of the cause is.
Mm.
I had a bit of a burnout, and also I ended up not being able to walk properly. My nerves and my hands were going a few years ago, and it was really scary. So the medicine I would need if I was going down the allopathic route, made the medicines through a homeopath.
Mm.
And to be honest, I still, because of COVID and all things, I'm only just getting my doctor's appointments now, and it's like
Yeah.
18 months, 2 years later. So I would say find a really good team, two or three people, or one really good person who can really help. Who's not, I mean, of course, you can get good healers and stuff, but people who can actually test your system
Yeah.
and find out exactly what's going on. So yeah,
Yeah. Love that.
definitely one of my tips. And second is of course like nutrition. Try and cut out all the refined sugars. Have a very
Totally.
high vegetable diet. I'm somebody who can't do without meat, so I'm sorry for I have tried to be vegetarian, vegan, raw food, all the things, and I just get really really sick. So for some people they
I'm
can't
the
do
other
that.
way, that I don't want to be eating all the meat, and they're like, we need you eating more meat. We really do. You need it in your diet.
Yeah, so I would say, a lot of people do give up that meat, and actually they do need it for, especially if you've been really sick. Some people go like really the opposite and go raw or, full detox, but the body is just too weak to be dealing with that.
Yeah.
So that's another good tip. And the other
Yeah, I
is
think
just
that's
really
great.
get yourself into a place where you can minimize stress. So
Yeah, so
find
good.
some 2 or 3 things that you just love doing and just make sure every day you're doing at least 1 or 2 of them, and
Yeah.
then bounce them out with like a really good rhythm with, yeah, I've got to get this done, but actually it feels expansive because I'm going to do this later.
Yeah.
So keeping in your happy
I think that
place.
stress, eliminating that and creating space that is happy space is underestimated right now. And I think that it is so important for all of us functioning in our whole ecosystem. So like if you're feeling stressed, you are never going to hit the numbers unless it's going to put extra pressure on you. And you're feeling stressed, you're going to say things in relationships that are either going to lose you team or lose you partnerships or friends or family or whatever because of the stress. So the stress never adds any value to any of us in whatever space we're in right now. So and I think it's an underestimated sort of evil in our environment.
Yeah, it's actually the root of my work is to help to clear the system of the, getting you out of the fight or flight and the protective mechanism. The stress gives you an
Interesting. Okay, I had no idea.
Yeah,
So there you
an
go.
identity or a coping mechanism that actually isn't really you. It's a coping mechanism or a protective mechanism. And then you think that's you because you've been doing it so long, or your nervous system has to do it to feel safe.
Yeah.
And when you can get outside of that identity or that energy influx, which isn't healthy, then you can start to clearly think. You can be in a space rather than have to do or have to compromise or have to make adjustments for.
So tell me with the fight and flight, was that something that you went down that pathway because you were finding yourself in fight and flight all the time, or was it something you saw in people that you were working with? Why this?
I think I had it from early on, from really tiny. Some quite traumatic, some just really stressful situations. I was an early carer for my mom, kind of mixed relationships with
Huge.
my parents. Then yeah, just I kind of became used to things being on edge. I actually kind of thrived on edge. So I would seek out, like, as soon as everything was normal, I was like, something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go wrong. I better kind of make it go wrong because then I've got a bit of control over why or how.
See, so tell me more about that, because I get told that a lot and I've heard that over the years, but that was something, and I think that was actually the key to me not staying in drama, was I hated being in that situation. I felt more out of control because it was out of control, in chaos, and overwhelm, things like that, that fight and flight. How did you want to stay in there, or like why what was it about that you go, oh, I've got control in there?
I think the nervous system just gets used to it. It's familiar. It's comfortable. It's not really comfortable, but it's known.
Yeah.
So that known state is easier than the unknown state. Like the unknown state of silence or quiet, or like, is something going to happen? That's kind of freaky for someone who's been, in a tumultuous situation for much of their life. So it's almost like the drive of the entrepreneur or the drive of kind of the businessman, needing
Absolutely.
to keep going, not being able to sit still, just wondering what's next, being on that edge all the time. But actually being on that edge stops you from being open to your full senses. It stops you from really fine tuning into that sensitivity. In that sensitivity is the gold, because you're be able to tune into things, in your intuition or in your instincts, or outside of what's physically happening in your energetic nervous system. So the energetic nervous system, when it's on full thriving, it takes up a lot of space. And then when you can calm it down and release it, which is what I do with my clients, then all of a sudden there's a
Yeah.
whole new layer of space. And from there, life is so different because you are in a state of being. You can get in a state of super flow. You actually can get through that ceiling of that next level that you're trying to reach. It's amazing.
That's so strange. Like I don't relate to that piece, even though I've had such a, a horrible past of an old story, that used to be very, very much broken and falling apart. But that was the thing that I was drawn to, going, why is it that so many other people have a happy life? Why is it there's so much, even when people have been delivered horrible environments that they've been born into or grown up in, or, being handed, they've chosen to go a different pathway. And that became fascinating to me, like so fascinating, that I built my whole life around that, figuring out looking at the patterns of those that in the environments in which we find ourselves in, but then going, what am I doing with the data that I have that now is coming in? What am I doing with it? And then where do I actually want to be? And it's interesting because one of the things that I know, and when I was early on in business, I worked a lot with females who were startups, and I realized very quickly that was not my arena to play in. And when I mean startups, I mean they were like just thinking about having a business. They were starting to run their business. And I didn't have the patience for it, because a lot of the time, anyone that started any business, anyone that started any new initiative, the next level of what that can look like, there are always the teething problems. There's always those stresses and the challenges. What I love is when those can move through those as fast as possible, because we all go through them. I'm not saying we never do, because we do. But I couldn't handle those that got stuck in them. As in, they would be still having the same problem a year later, 2 years later. And I realized at that time, many loved the drama of what is versus the unknown and moving into what is so much better. And I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't understand how you'd want to stay in that moment. But having been around the traps a little while now, I definitely just go, they're not my people, as in there's many that can work with them. I tend to work with those that are really on the pioneering, innovative, and already got something happening, but want to play at a much bigger level. And it's not that one was better than the other. Don't get me wrong. I just didn't have the patience. I didn't have the, what is it? Unless you want to change, here's 50 million other people that can work with you, is what I.
Yeah,
I'm probably going to get a lot of haters from this conversation, but it's the truth. It is what literally happened.
I think the underlying issues of those people having this teething problems are the same as the bigger problems of people up leveling.
Of course.
I think the root of them are the same.
Absolutely. By the way, the patterns were definitely the same.
Yeah, but it's just how willing they are to acknowledge those things and how ready they are to actually work on it. Because
I think it's that key more. So often people are willing to acknowledge, not always, as you're saying, but I think the key to that piece is when you acknowledge it, are you willing to disrupt whatever that pattern is to then rewire to a different one?
The bottom line is it costing them enough that they need to move? Like if it's like pushing them to the edge of, I don't know, about to throw out a relationship or being really pushed to the edge of their business. Or,
and by the way, in many cases it was.
Yeah.
And in many cases they would rather throw out that relationship than do the hard work to actually pull through. And we've all been there. We've all been through those moments. Like, I was just literally, we had a reach out yesterday of someone who's got a child that's been told that is only going to live for a certain amount of time. And they were asking us as a couple, my husband and I, of what we did when we were faced with 28 weeks, the prognosis of a child being born. If he was lucky to be born, they thought he was going to be dead at birth, but if he was going to survive that, at best case, he'd be in a vegetated state. How did we deal with things like that? How did we deal with? And so I gave literally, a whole lot of just insights to how to work through that challenge. It was a pretty horrific challenge, and it continues, and it's such a journey. But reality was, I wanted the results of something different than what I was being told, than staying in that. So, if I just take his example, my son, his whole brain, half of it was brain damage and speckles on the other side. Hence why they didn't think he would survive. Hence why they figured that he'd be in a vegetated state if he was to survive. All of the speaking was the side that was totally brain damaged. But my whole thinking and what I've learned through the pattern work that I do is that actually we have all these brain cells we don't use. So if that's a truth, then how do we sort of just unplug that wire that's not working right now and plug it into a system that's going to give us a pathway to be able to move that?
Yeah. And for me, I'm always very optimistic, and I will always see the best outcome possible. And sometimes it is really hard to get people moving who are just comfortable or more comfortable with what they know. I like to offer everybody the chance, but also if people aren't ready or they haven't had enough of that shock, they haven't had enough of that fear, can't see that full vision. That's something I'm very good at doing for people, is helping them to see their full vision, their next level. Sometimes they can't see it, sometimes they can see it and they just can't reach it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a superpower of mine to like help people get through that.
So give me a strategy around how you do that.
Well, first of all, it's figuring out what that looping pattern is.
Yeah.
And often it's presenting as something current, but it's generally something which happened when they were much, much smaller, and there'll be different replications of it through their life. So first of all, it's recognizing it. And even before that, I would say it's knowing that there's a next level that they're not able to reach. So they have to be conscious, they have to be aware. And of course, that can come through some mentoring and discussion. But the best way for me is actually to test the energy system. So I use a kinesiology type method, but more based around the mind, emotions, and the energy of the imprints themselves. So we can backtrack and reverse engineer. It's really, really powerful because it does literally release that block. And then it frees up the energy, and all of a sudden they've got all this new energy. There's a wider perspective. They're not just working on getting that protective mechanism or maintaining that protective mechanism and keeping inside that safety box. So it's a little bit of pushing, a little bit of pulling, getting them to see their future vision, their future self, getting them to rearrange quite a bit in their environment and their habits. Not loads necessarily. It can even be 2 or 3 small tweaks, but those things are so specific to them. I use a methodology which goes into 9 spectrums of self. Some of them are pretty kind of yogic, cosmic, and some of them are very practical, like environment, how people relate to space and time.
Relate to that, yes.
Also people's polarity, what pushes them, what pulls them. Some people really, really love.
Give me an example of pushing, pulling. Just
some people,
because I always think that we live this world and we know, and we're in our heads in a lot of this, and our listeners sometimes hear a word or hear a thought and go, what are they talking about when they're having that conversation? So
for me, push pull is some people love expanding and kind of dreaming and building. Some people
my favorite. I'm one of those.
That's me too. Some people love being in that focused, detail oriented, or sometimes internal state. And actually, like the breath of life, or like our own breath, we need the exhale, we need the inhale, we need the pause in between.
Yes.
So it's really, everyone needs to find their own rhythm of push and pull. There's always needs to be enough tension to keep and maintain that hold and pull, but enough relaxation that there's also an ease. And everybody's, each relationship, each conversation, each situation, each choice is all about us being aware of our own natural rhythm with polarity.
Yeah.
So a project.
Can I just interrupt that for a second? Because when you talk about like this, I go and I put myself into that situation, and I go, I think one of the interesting things and one of the most trickiest things I have had to learn to work with rather than against in my own life is the fact that I'm hugely big, like with the whole visionary, the whole future thinking, that side of it. But I'm actually really good in the analytical, logical, the
Focus,
strategic,
detail.
the focus, the going right to where are we now, being present, going, what is that? What do I need to think about? And then pulling all those things. The problem with this, I mean, it's my genius zone now, and it's why I do what I do and can do what I do. But I have to tell you, for many, many years, it meant that I didn't fit in with the big visionaries. I didn't fit in with the ones that think very logical and analytical and now, and I didn't sort of just fit in with the ones that do the strategy and because I had pieces of all of those things that were so strong in me. And if I ever saw a weakness in anything, I'd go, oh, what is that piece that I'm missing there? And I'd go and work on that piece until I became a lot stronger again in that area.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really profound, because for most people, either they steer away from what they're not good at, but learning how to ride that wave where you can do both. Like this was the same with me. I've always been super sensitive, very in tune, really intuitive. And then, but I also like being productive and getting shit done. Like times where I like went to live in communities or with the Buddhists or with the sadhus in India.
Yes.
It was great. And I'm like, yeah, but this is kind of boring. Like you guys have got so much to do.
But you knew the power of what they were doing and how important
but there
it was.
was so much potential. And I'm like, but we could get loads of shit done as well. Like,
That's
do we have to sit like in a cave forever? It's like, no, that's not me. But then I would try and get into like the productive, kind of really Western driven world. And I didn't also fit in there.
No,
so this,
nor me.
My whole methodology is actually getting that balance between the two, because we don't have to choose. We are multifaceted. And like, who said we have to just be good at maths, or you know what I'm saying?
And that's kind of where you come into that rebel side, because this is not the normal thinking, right? Like this is not necessarily the most accepted. And I have to tell you that we have to own this piece. I totally agree. But then we have to work in civil society as well. And how does that work? What are you seeing with that? What's your insights around that?
Well, even in like my own world, like sometimes I'm really driven and sometimes I just need to, I'm not very good at resting, to be honest.
Oh, I hear you, girl. I hear you.
Yeah, but I had to get sick. I had to get sick myself. We talked about that at the beginning.
Me too.
To actually be able to hone in that part of me. Even though I love meditating, I love teaching yoga, run festivals and all sorts of things for people to do that themselves. To be still, the nervous system has to be on a really, really good level. So
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I love this piece so much that I want people to understand this piece, because I think it's in that stillness that, and I can't wait to hear what you've got to say around that stillness, because I had to learn what that stillness needed to look like for me. So for others, they can sit for how many days, not eat anything, breathe, and sit by the water, and that to them is stillness. Others meditate for hours in their day. Others, like do all these different things. I had to learn, and I tried that. I was in the fitness industry, and I have to say there was, like Pilates, yoga, all those kind of classes. It was a combination of what they called that. And I would go in that class and I would try my hardest to be in that moment, to be
In that
breathing
Zen space.
through
Yeah.
those movements. Do not think of anything else. You're telling me not to think of anything else? All I can think about is now this, and this. And I had to learn ways in which I had to learn to be still. What's that for you? I'll tell you mine after, but what's that for you?
Well, to be honest, I started meditating when I was 13, and I've always
Yeah.
had a really busy mind, and I've got a lot of hacks that help to
Mm,
accelerate that
me
process.
too.
So
Yeah.
I do a lot of different kriyas, a lot of visualization. Like when you combine the breath and a visualization and a mantra, and you've got your intention of where you want to go, it's like everything aligns. So like for some people who've got busy minds, you actually have to just keep the mind busy, and it's not a question of trying. If you're trying to tell someone
Oh,
to
I
shut
love
up,
that. I love
if
that.
you're using it's like if there's a clock ticking and I was like the clock's annoying, it's like fucking sorry, excuse me, shut up, you actually
You're
use
fine.
it. No, you use it for your meditation. Thank you,
Ah,
God.
yes.
Thank you, God. So or you know, or get
So it's
into
going with it
gratitude.
rather than against it, right?
Exactly. So and that's the whole point, is going with your own natural flow and
Yeah.
your own natural tendencies. We each,
So
some of
good.
us are really busy in the mind, some of us are more feeling, some of us are more sound oriented, and actually the power of the mind is so great. And when you
So great.
utilize what your natural tendencies are,
Yeah.
and you can hack the system like really
Oh,
easily.
so much so. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I never hear people that talk about stillness saying that it's okay to be busy in the brain. But I have always said that to those, because a lot of the ones that play at big levels, we have very busy brains. A lot of us have smartness, and so our brains are constantly working things out. And I talk about hacks as well, and a lot of what I do, because I had to learn those hacks to be able to feel really at peace in different situations. And I think that was the thing that was missing for many years in my life, was I didn't know how to do those things. So an example being, in business, as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, there is always things to do. There's always the to-do lists, and the to-do lists can get bigger and bigger the more you think of them. And I remember thinking, okay, so sleep is really powerful. We need to have it. And you need to learn how to wind down. How do you do that if you've got all these things in your brain that you still got to do? And so I am really clear in the morning of how what is it I need to actually get done today. And I have other ways in which to put some of those other things in. So I say it's the now, the next, and the soon lists, and they've got different times when I go back to them. So it's not that I don't forget those things; they've got their place. It's just not now in my brain that I need to worry about. And then I work on the now. So whatever I've got for that day, so it might be 3 to 5 things that I'm going to do today, and I do those. The end of the day comes, and I look at it and I go, okay, have I achieved these 3 to 5 things, whatever it is? Because some days they're like little things, and other days they're like just big things. So it might be just one thing I'm doing. And I go, I got this much done, but I actually didn't get the 4th and the 5th thing done. And where in the past that would have stressed me out, and I would have, gone, oh, I didn't get the 4th and the 5th, and, and then had to work through the night or something. And then I go and ask the question, and I go, is there anything else I could have humanly possibly done today in my work day? And it might be, look, I could send an email, a message about that 4th one, and the 5th one, oh, that just needs to be put on the soon list. I don't need to worry about that. Okay, cool. So then I send that email, and then I ask that question again. Is there anything else humanly possible that I could have done today? And the reality is there was nothing else I could have done. I did everything I possibly could have done. My workday is complete, and I put it onto my now list for tomorrow. So I start looking at it then. And that gave me such permission to sign off from work at night and not be
Yeah,
stressing
and
about it throughout
I
my night.
think even taking it a step further, it's sometimes, sometimes when we're trying to get a job done and we're just not in the right space, it's actually time to switch off, go for a walk, have a dance, chat with
Oh
a
yeah, that wasn't
partner.
enough for me. I do all that anyway, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
still in my head. And so I
Mhm.
literally had to learn how to
Mhm.
compartmentalize
Mhm.
what I have in my head so that I'm not leaving that behind. I'm not, it's not that I'm ignoring it. It's not
Mhm.
that it's not going to get done,
Mhm.
but that actually it's all I could have humanly done today.
Yeah,
Because
and
none of
also
us
it's
have
it's it's it's
wings and flying around the room. So
yeah, and it's also figuring out like what is like for me something I did at the beginning of the day is like connect with my highest intention
yeah,
for that day,
perfect.
and maybe the task that I had yesterday or the day before might not be as high a priority as I might have thought, because my highest intention for that day is to do, I don't know, a little bit more self-care or to take care of something else that's come up, or it's being able to connect in with that creative flow. The creative flow of a project may not be the way our mind thinks it should be,
Mm.
so it's almost
Tell
stepping
us more
out.
about that.
So everything has a natural expansion and contraction, like I was saying.
Yeah.
And on the expansion, that's the part of the project where we're, the thoughts are flying in, all the different elements are magnetizing in. And
Mm.
then there's a pause and then it outbursts. But if we're
Yes.
trying to outbirth it, like get it done, forcing it this way, it's got to be this way, before all the elements have come in, we might be missing some pieces of conversation, communication, information, just things haven't had time. It's a bit like
Yeah.
planting the seed and then we water it and the sun goes on it and it's in the
Yeah.
dark for a little while and then it bursts out. So sometimes there's an element of needing to let go a little bit to give a bit more space, and that might be a bit more space for ourselves, so we're not pushing through a phase where actually we're still musing on it, or there's still information that needs to come in. And also just sometimes there needs to be a pause before like that right time for it to come out. If we think we know exactly how everything has got to be done, sometimes we miss some of the gold in maybe a phone call or a contact or a
Yeah.
connection who's actually that next piece for that project. So it's about being able to be in that state of peace and not forcing, to get into a deep meditation state. It was kind of going back to that state of peace. You've got concentration, you've got contemplation, and then meditation. The concentration is where you're stopping the mind, you're keeping it busy with the breath, the mantra, the visualization, whatever you're doing. Then there's a state where you're forgetting to do those things, and it's kind of that in between state, and then you go into that deepness of meditation. And that's a little bit the same as when you're like starting on a project or you're working on a project. First you're going to be really focused knowing all the to-do steps, and then all of a sudden different elements come in that maybe you hadn't thought of. That's like, oh, it could be this way, or oh my god, so and so called me, maybe she's the right person. Oh wow, she's got a venue or whatever it is. And it's allowing life to be part of that process, because in our own little mind and sometimes our own ego and our own busyness, I've got to fit it in this time, that doesn't necessarily leave the time for the seed to be germinating and sprouting in its own rhythm. So that it goes back to that push and pull, the polarity, and the understanding that life itself has its own rhythm, and so does a relationship, so does a conversation, so does a project. And often that's about creating the right space, creating the right environment, just like we would do for a plant, for the project to seed, take root, magnetize what's needed.
Yeah.
So that's quite a big part of, for me, of kind of that element of trust and being in that stillness of being rather than doing, and knowing when it's time to switch it off and then come back to it. It's a bit like when you've worked on a really great piece of writing and then you just have to turn off and then come back the next day or in a couple of
That's the
days.
worst. I'd rather just sit there and do the whole thing for years. Like, I'm a thorough writer. I'm not a quick writer. That's how I always say it. In other words, I'm very slow at writing, but I like writing. And
But
I
sometimes
hate
you're
that
like in the
interruption.
shower and you suddenly get that last idea. It's like, oh my God, that's the one. But
The
you've had to
best thing is the phone
my
and
voice
having
notes.
notes on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I just write on it, but like
Okay.
the notes on there is my favorite place, because if I get that moment, which, like you said, because you've got the space, that all of a sudden you get this, that's what I'm trying to think, or that's who I need to connect with, or whatever. That's my notes, is my lifesaver.
I do voice notes like that, but also it means like committing to giving yourself that space, that break, you know, that walk out in nature or whatever gets you high. And from that state, you're going to be a lot more productive, you know, than pushing through.
So why do we not put more of this into our everyday businesses, culture that we're building out? Because I see the importance in all of this, but I'm not seeing a lot of this.
I know, and it feels counterintuitive. It's like you've got to get something done. Like, why are you going to switch your computer off and go for a walk? But actually, it's so ingrained in our culture and society right from education. Right from education at the beginning. You know, we're kind of pushed through school, really tight timetable, go home. You haven't got time to do anything, got to do your homework, got to get it done. And it's I think it probably goes back to like the 9-to-5 working day that was brought in, you know, and when you look much more at cultures who are, you know, indigenous cultures who are much more in touch with their natural rhythms, you know, the seasons, the flow of the moon cycles, the natural thing when the lights go down and you light a fire and you talk and sing, and you know, and you're not pushing through the tasks. Like the sun's gone down. Almost going back to the paleo lifestyle, you know. And it's so hard. It's so hard. But actually, when you start to do a couple of those things for yourself, suddenly the system can breathe. The nervous system isn't on that tension edge. You know, you can soothe and ease the nervous system to learn to relax and learn to be in that state of oneness, and from there your senses open up.
Yeah, totally. That's actually how I start my day every day. Like before coming on here, you know, I've already spent time with the puppies that we've got, taking them out, and I've been for the swim and done my exercise in the pool. Made my water with my electrolytes in it, ready for my day today, and now I'm drinking my black coffee, done my measurements, because, and my gratefulness, and I've got some a little piece more to do after we get off this call. But those things, if I don't put them in my day, I don't function anymore. I literally don't function. And I don't see it as a waste of time. I see it actually a massive part of productivity, because I am tracking my indicators on things like my exercise, my health, my baselines. I know where my body is at. I know
ketos,
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the reason I'm doing that, is because I want to have baselines on everything I'm doing. Why? Because it becomes priority when you go, I need to see growth here. I need to see growth here. And for me, that is spending time. You know, how much time have I spent today? You know, this is what I often ask at the end of the day. How much time today have I spent on writing something? In other words, putting more into the IP, the stuff that's in my head that will eventually get left behind as my legacy. And if I die with it, it's going to be pretty useless. So have I spent some time putting that into whatever that is? Maybe it's the book, maybe it's in the next article, whatever that is, right? And I think that the old approach was you had to go to your 9-to-5 kind of job or business, and you just had to be pumping at it nonstop, and that was going to be the most growth that you'd get, productivity. It would build out the best business that you've got. There's so much research now showing that this is not a truth, showing that you need to have lots of sleep, or showing that you need lots of movement, that actually being stuck in front of a computer is
Yeah,
really not healthy.
the blue zone.
I do.
Yeah. I've actually developed a methodology and a journaling method called what's called life navigation, and it's about making sure that all your spectrums are in balance.
Yeah.
It is so profound. So the clients I work with one-to-one kind of really get into that on quite a deep level, but you can also just do it on its own.
Yeah.
And it's a really deep remembering. You get to remember, like, in the cells and in the soul, more of who you truly are, rather than the identity of, oh, I've got to be good at this, oh, I've got to get this much stuff done today, and I'm gonna feel good about myself if I've done more than so and so who's working in the next booth. You know what I mean? It's like, we're not robots, we're not machines. Well, we will be soon when they chip us all and all the other things. You know what I mean?
Let's hope not. Hey, when we were talking before, we were saying things like, well, that's kind of the rebel side of you, that's the disruptive side of you. What if it wasn't? What if in part of our new approach to doing things differently to get different results, this wasn't a strange thing to be talking about what we have?
I know, it shouldn't be. That should be normal, and that's the crazy thing.
So how do we get there? What does that need to look like?
Sorry, my battery looks like it's going out. It is plugged in, but I need to check it.
This is important. For the listeners that are listening as she's doing this, why are we? Why is this the rebel thing? Why is this not the normal? Why is the old approach, even though many times, like I have had so many conversations here on the decision table where we find ourselves going, we need a new approach. It's why everything I talk about is about this need for a new approach. Why do I have so many people in my world that are saying, yes, we need a new approach, yet we're still stuck in so many systems that are archaic, so many systems stuck in conditionings and biases that are just not serving us going forward. Anyway, you're back, Emma.
And this disruption is, we are actually disrupting the norm. So we're disrupting what happened in our nervous system when we were small that we became comfortable and used to. We're disrupting what's happening in the society or identity of our family and culture, again, that we've become used to without even questioning it. And we're disrupting how we've become used to seeing ourselves to enable us to step into that next level future self. And for me, this is normal and should be normal for everybody.
And for me too, which is why it's easy to have a conversation. But in the same way, I go, we're still having some of these conversations and we're still asking some of these questions. And
we need to, because things need to shake up. It's like, it's not until you start shaking that that things can spark.
So if we were to shake it, how can we shake it so we're narrowing that gap, that from this being not the norm to becoming the norm?
We have to go do a little bit of what feels counterintuitive to our nervous system and to the societal patterns. So we do have to do what feels like is a little bit of a rebellious thing, even though it's
bring it on.
Even though it's like deep self-love, radical self-love. We weren't taught to love ourselves as we should have been loved. The societal models are nowhere near what we as human beings need. And it should be a lot more normal to be in touch with our own needs and to be following them without questioning them. But there's so much questioning because that we have so many models of what's normal, what things should be, or how people get called out when they're doing something different. And if we all stand together and support each other in doing that and make that the norm, and look at optimizing ourselves and really stepping into what's possible, then
I love
it's
that.
all at your fingertips.
It is. And I think, yep, you know, one of the things that I saw a lot of when I was traveling the world nonstop was, and I began writing a book, and then this thing called a pandemic hit the world. And I ended up not writing the book because it was called isolation. And I felt that everyone was going to think that I was writing about a pandemic, and I wasn't. It was actually and I called it an epidemic I saw within leadership, actually, in the human race. And that was like, I just saw it nonstop in all the work that I was doing across the globe, this whole isolation case. And, you know, there were leaders who were isolating, there were minorities that were isolating, you name it, it was isolation. And what I said was the solution by the end of what I was writing was, I felt that it was collaboration. Because I felt that unless we come together, unless we start unifying our, you know, goals to see, you know, paradigm shifting, then, you know, we can try and do it on our own, but we are so much stronger when we collaborate with one
I don't know if we
another.
can fully do it on our own, because
well, I don't believe we can.
Yeah,
so
we're
I
a
agree.
community. We're community beings, and
I believe we are all having to own what we can do on our own.
Yeah,
but
we
as
have
a
to take
collective,
radical ownership. But
Yeah.
as my energy sparks, your sparks,
Yeah.
and as your conversation sparks, it sparks my
Yes.
mind, and it's like that. That sparking, it's almost like having the test tube with all the elements in. But
Totally
we
agree.
bounce off each other and we support each other, and it's a natural and really healthy model to be coming together in.
It is, but again, this is not the norm. We do not see many things that are great and collaborative. And, you know, the thing is, you know, it's interesting because we talked about this when I first came on, like just as we were putting headphones on and getting the microphones ready. And that was the fact that I'm here in Australia, and on the East Coast here, we've been dealing with floods. And, you know, there's a lot of people getting cranky right now because, and in many cases, right, because the government haven't or aren't providing the services they want, and the communities had to kick in. But, you know, there's a side of me that goes, but isn't that what community's about? Isn't that what we actually need to stop relying on some of these systems that aren't serving us, and really realize that we have got to work together as a community that's a collective that is going to bring forth what is needed in the human race going forward. And I know this is going to rack up lots of people on my side of town, which is why I hesitated saying that. But I do really, truly feel it right now that we can,
you know?
well, we can rely on these systems. And yes, we have in the past. And yes, we might pay taxes and we do all the different things that we hope that they use those finances to give us the services we need when we need them. But I think we have to get back, and this comes back to a lot of my work on, you know, smart humans making smart decisions. We have to rely on our human intelligence. And as a collective, we have human intelligence we can call on, and we need to connect with that and collaborate with that.
Yeah, the systems are only as useful as the amount of love that the humans have got who are running them. You know what I mean? And that's the gap. And we have
not only that, I think also the freedom of how they are allowed to use their smartness within it, because within those systems there is often centralization. There is often pieces of it where there are rules, regulations, and they can't move beyond that, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, but all of that disempowers us from being in the collective and being able to come together.
So it goes back to the collective and the communities around us. And I feel that although we've in the past relied on other things to almost leverage that responsibility out, I think it's time for us as a human race to figure out, how can we help our neighbor? How can we be part of this community? How can we add value to other people as they need to be the best they can as well, not just you or me.
Yeah, I founded a homeless soup kitchen in the UK like 10 years
Oh,
ago. And now it's kind of moved building. We're serving 150 people a week, and
amazing.
so many meals, and helps with housing and rehabilitation and all the things. And I've always had that element to me that unless I'm giving back, I
Yeah,
can't sit back and
I'm here
receive.
with you. Yes,
And
so good.
it takes, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah, and we're not doing that. And I think that is one of the things we can go back to in our culture when we're building our culture going forward is how are we building communities? What is that tribal part that maybe we left behind, yet we need to bring forward? Anyway, so many things. If someone wants to know more about what you do, how do they connect with you? How do they get to know more of what your
They can
amazingnesses across the globe?
they can find me on my web mentor on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, I work with leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries who are looking to get to that next level. So overcoming the pieces that keep dragging them back, the
Yeah.
looping patterns, the brick walls they keep hitting. And really that's about us tweaking, finding those blocks, clearing the energy, and moving forward with a new vibrancy in life.
Okay, so it's come to this time in the decision table where I do ask the one question the same every time. And that is, what are you taking from our conversation today?
The richness that's been reminded to me in our conversation is definitely about community. And I think obviously hearing about the floods there with you, I mean, we're all in such a crazy world right now.
Yeah.
And that need for us to really reach out and remind ourselves and each others that we can't do it alone. And no matter how good we are at one thing, no matter what we're leading in, what we're thriving on, there's an element of sparking off together that is going to help us to really do a much greater service to us as individuals and to the collective.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is interesting across the globe right now is we're seeing a shakeup. You talked about a shakeup, and I think that part of that shakeup is that us as humans need to collaborate. We need to, have stronger communities. You look at what's happening in the Ukraine. It cannot happen with just the Ukraine themselves. What an amazing country. And that is, just fighting until the bitter end. But now we're seeing people from across the globe. I saw some things yesterday where some Americans are coming over to fight. We've got different, all the sanctions across. It is going to take a world collaborating together to make sure that, the Ukraine are able to continue in the way that they need to be able to continue. And I just go, does it, it kind of breaks my heart that it takes major challenges like floods, like pandemics, like, a war for humans to realize that there is more than just building out your own little world. And just because you want it a certain way, it doesn't fit all together as the bigger puzzle across the globe. And I think one of the things about these challenges is that it's created space for people to realize maybe there's a little more than what we've been doing in the past. And so that gives me hope on some of our conversation today. And that is, we've talked about things that are really kind of stuck in the old approach. And we're almost like little rebels or disruptors. And what if we were to bring that to the norm, and that became the norm? And I think that's what I'm taking from our conversation is, how do we keep narrowing that gap so that we start asking different questions. Like I feel like I've spent the last 2 years asking a lot of the same questions to see if I'm on the right path on this. And I would love for us to be able to start asking different questions along this, because this has now become our norm and we're just growing, and I don't know, we can springboard off some of this. So that's kind of what I'm taking from that, going, my work is so important, because I think that's a good reminder sometimes, right? Because we get stuck in the everyday sort of, it's just another day, it's another piece of it of, oh my goodness, is anyone even listening? And it's like, how cool is it that there is someone else out there who is trying to see that we do it differently? And I think that's what's so powerful about all of these conversations we have on the decision table, is that we're not alone, we're not isolated. There are many others, but I think it just reminds me back to something that I spent almost 2 years solidly on, and that is collaboration. And how do we continue, even though there's lots of needs and lots of us are really busy in our own worlds, how can we still keep collaborating? Because I think there's a lot of power in that. And you've reminded me about that today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kira. Really, really amazing to connect with you.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you felt like you wanted to say but you didn't get to say?
No, just make sure you take space for yourself, whatever you're doing. Just, take those moments of wonder, whether it's in the breath, whether it's in the nature or water, or, some magical conversations, because it's only when we bring space that we can change the conditions that it's actually going to be reverse engineering us showing up differently.
Love that. All right. Thank you. Thank you for our conversation today. What an amazing conversation.
Thanks, Kira Marie.